1945. The world was in turmoil. The war was coming to an end. The Nazis were in full retreat, but the Japanese fought on with fanaticism. And into this maelstrom, kicking and screaming, on the 4th of January, came James Clyde Gardiner. Jim grew up in the Sydney suburb of Ryde with his older brother Richard and younger brother John. But at some point he found himself on the south coast of New South Wales in the little township of Bodalla.
In 1955 I went to school here at, this is the Bodalla Primary School. Each row of desks in the classroom was a different year, from kindergarten through to 6th class. They were all different years, one teacher, and the board was split into 6 different areas, so he'd teach 6 years at the one time. This area had an old bomb shelter still there when I went to school, and then up on the hill up here is the school teachers' residence.
In 1958, and now living back in Ryde, Jim started at Epping Boys High School, and it was here that he met up with a bunch of mates who became lifelong friends.
Yes, we were mates for nearly 70 years, and I really valued those friendships. John Cook, Kenny Warner, Phil Shaw, Brian Horn and Dennis Page. We had fun together, got into trouble together, helped each other through thick and thin, and we looked after each other. Truly great mates. So when the school celebrated its 50th anniversary, we all got together at the reunion. Some of our stories will never be repeated. We caught up with some old school blokes we hadn't seen for years.
When Jim and Richard were old enough to drive, their father bought them a brand new Mini Minor each. That gave Jim his freedom. He was able to get out and about with all his mates. And one of the popular places to visit was Kenny Warner's uncle's farm at Kempsey. It looks like Jim is planning on some serious duck hunting here. A visit to the old Trial Bay jail near Kempsey was a must. The old cells were dark and dingy, and some good old-fashioned silliness didn't go astray. There's not many bubbles in this bath, Jim. John Blinkhorn, Kenny Warner, Max Farr, and Jim. Are these guys having fun or not? And then, of course, was the display of horsemanship. Yippee! Ride 'em, cowboy! How good was that?
We went back there many times over the years. It was great to reminisce and tell stories about the good old days. That's me on the left, then John Cook, John Blinkhorn, Brian Horn and Dennis Page. Kenny Warner cooks some breakfast. And later it's lunch together at Southwest Rocks.
In the 50s and 60s, a very popular place for the Gardiner family was Doris, on the New South Wales south coast.
Here, when we were young kids, we had a 10 by 10 or thereabouts tent. We used to put it here, and we lie in the shade from one pine tree. There wasn't much here, only mostly grass. But it was a great area here.
These movies were taken in 1965, when Jim went down there with his then girlfriend Joan. Joan was soon to become his first wife. Durras has changed a lot over the years, but Jim loved to get back down there and reminisce about the old days.
Yeah, well, this is Durras Lake on the south side. It's slightly changed here a bit, but we used to come down here prawning in a dark, no moon, and you had to wear tennis shoes because there's fortescues in this water, which I didn't understand what fortescues were until my little toe hung out the corner of my tennis shoe and I stood on one. Well, when you get stung, they sting you until the tide changes, they reckon, or 8 hours. It's unbelievable pain. But in any case, we used to catch the prawns here by the kerosene tinful, which is a 4-gallon kerosene tin, and we'd catch 4 gallons at each night, take them home and boil them up. The amount of prawns in this lake, it's surprising.
You reckon this is the place where we pulled up that night in the Plymouth, Jim?
Yeah, this is the place in 1964, 65. Came here, I had a 1955 Plymouth, which had a huge boot. And we pulled up about here before these trees and shrubs were here. And it was dark, so we decided we'd just camp here for the night. So Max opened the boot and he slept in the boot. And in the morning, he woke up and, or cutting back just before that, in the night he got up and had a little twinkle, got back into the boot and slept. But in the morning he got up and turned left and saw that he was about 3 feet from a 50-foot drop. In areas like this, that is like this valley, my grandfather in his later years never worked. He'd get on the horse once every 4 to 5 weeks and ride off to where they didn't know, and he'd come back with a bottle full of gold. So all this area has alluvial gold in the creeks.
One of the stupidest things we ever did was when John Blinkhorn and I drove to Cairns and back in just 1 week. We didn't realise how far it was, and we had to be in Sydney for work.
It looks like Jim was the head chef on that trip. It needs a little salt.
We blasted through Townsville and on to Cairns. Spent a day on Green Island, saw some coral, and drove all the way back to Sydney non-stop, nearly 2,000 kilometres with 3 drivers taking turns. Absolutely crazy.
About 1964, Jim started working and training as a male nurse at the North Ryde Psychiatric Centre. It was here that he met his first wife, Joan, and they were married in 1965. However, that marriage was short-lived, and in 1968, Jim eloped to the Gold Coast with Tricia. Tricia became Jim's second wife and gave birth to a beautiful daughter named Colette on New Year's Day, 1969. By now, they were back in Sydney and Jim was looking for a new career. And so it was that Jim joined the New South Wales Police Force.
Well, I was waiting for my police training to start. John Blinkhorn, John Cook and I decided to go opal mining at Lightning Ridge in Cook's old 1937 Chev. Of course, we had to stop for a cold refreshment along the way.
They spent the first night camped in a paddock somewhere near Gulagenbone. It all goes together somehow, guys. Then they pressed on towards Lightning Ridge the next day. They found a dead fox on the side of the road. And Jim decided they needed a foxtail for the car aerial. They set up camp for a week-long stay in Lightning Ridge. The ablutions were pretty basic. And the only place to have a bath was the naturally heated bore baths in the town. Seems like Nige was the head chef on this trip. Same recipe book, different chef. But they're here for the opals. And it's time to go underground. Blinkhorn goes first. Jim's turn. And now John. They went down about 50 feet or more, digging away, trying to find the mother lode. Lucky there was no one suffering from claustrophobia. Probably the hardest part was climbing back out again. They actually found more bits of opal scratching around on the surface than they did below. But it was thirsty work. And a well-earned beer was the order of the day. Before packing up after a week and heading back for home, because Jim had to get back to Sydney to start his training for the police force. So it was goodbye Lightning Ridge, and Sydney, here we come. The training was rigorous and disciplined, and he'd never been so physically fit in all his life. The graduation and passing out parade was always a grand affair, complete with police brass and pipe bands, motorcycles, mounted police, presided over by the Commissioner of Police. Jim passed out as a probationary constable in late 1969. His first station was Eastwood in northwestern Sydney, where he performed general duties for a couple of years, before being transferred to Mungandai, a small country town on the border with Queensland. He stayed there for a couple of years before deciding to leave the police. And he bought the local pub. He stayed in the pub for a couple more years, but by then his marriage to Tricia was falling apart. So he sold out of the pub and came back to Sydney, a single man again. He needed work, so he went back to his old nursing job at the North Ryde Psychiatric Centre, and that's where he met Jane, who was also a nurse there. They eventually married and had a beautiful daughter named Zoe. They set up home at Balcombe Hills, and Jim changed jobs. He became a private investigator. As a private detective, he was a great success. His boss once said, "He's like a chameleon. He's just as comfortable mixing with criminals as he is with royalty." Jim continued working as a private inquiry agent for several years, but eventually his marriage to Jane began to break down, and in 1984 he went back into the pub game. He took over the management of a pub in Gilgandra, and while he was in Gilgandra he met a local girl named Judy. Unfortunately for Jim, after about 12 months, the owner sold the pub and he found himself out of a job. So he teamed up with his old mate John Cook and they bought the Solar Heart franchise in Lismore. Together with the Coffs Harbour franchise, they had exclusive distribution rights for Solar Heart products from Nambucca Heads to the Queensland border. So Jim and Judy took up residence in Lennox Head and they ran the Solar Heart businesses until they were sold in 1989. After that, Jim and Judy got married and they moved to Pilliga, where they took over the management of the Pilliga pub. The marriage to Judy ended in disaster and she left and moved back home to Gilgandra, leaving Jim to run the pub alone in Pilliga. But one night the pub caught fire and burnt to the ground. Jim was lucky to escape without injury, but he lost all his possessions and family photos, and so he was out of a job again.
Back in Sydney again, Jim met a lady named Kim at Cornell, and before long, Cameron was born. Cameron went to live in Crescent Head with Kim, and Jim took up residence in a flat above some squash courts at Sutherland.
And it was there that he met Vonnie. Jim was employed as a ranger at both Parramatta and Liverpool councils, and he and Vonnie eventually got married. Before long, Vonnie gave birth to a very cute little boy named Jack, and together they raised him to be the magnificent young man he is today. When Jim eventually retired from work, his health was not kind to him, but he and Vonnie lived happily together for more than 25 years. Overall, he lived his life to the full. He touched the lives of many and sincerely valued his friends. In the end, he was surrounded by his loving family, Vonnie, Colette, Zoe and Jack.